Hey, let me ask you a question. Have you ever launched a demand gen campaign or a YouTube campaign and you were super stoked on it? You thought everything was going to work super well. You were excited on the creative and off it goes, right? You get hefty CTR, CPCs look good. You thought the video was great, but results are just crickets. No leads, no conversions. You're left like, what the heck, right? Scratching your head. This is a crappy place to be. And it seems to be happening more to people as I've been talking to them in 2025, not just on Google, but Meta, TikTok, everywhere else. As all the ad networks are creating these black box type algorithms, we're left wondering what the heck's going on underneath the hood. And it can be really hard to diagnose. And I've seen this time and time again in all the different demand gen campaigns and Google accounts that I'm looking at from a consulting basis, but as well in our agency that we run ads for. And I've come to realize one thing to be true. Most of us media buyers, we're not looking at the right data and we're not asking the right questions. When we see these campaigns that are going to crap that we think should be winners, we pretty much just scrap them all, go back to the drawing board and say, oh well, what are we going to do? And that is the wrong attitude to take. I can tell you that because I did that for 3 years, and the stress level and workload and all this stuff goes through the roof when we keep just, crumpling up an ad or a campaign and tossing it in the trash. It doesn't have to be that way. And what I have come to realize is that there are specific things we can look at, 3 in fact, that will help you get more clarity, figure out why something isn't working, and then make an educated hypothesis on what you can test. We call them experiments in our agency to try and resolve the bad result situation. Now, these 3 things, we call them the Conversion Triad, right? We're going to go through them in this video, and after you've watched this, you're going to be left with clarity on what to do and what to check in your demand gen accounts. This could work for PMAX as well, and you can scale this over to TikTok and Meta ads on Instagram or Facebook as well. We're going to talk about Google and demand gen here because that's primarily what our agency focuses on, but this concept, this framework that we've created called the Conversion Triad will work wherever. So what is the Conversion Triad? Well, it's three pieces of our overall funnel or our campaign we need to pay attention to. 1, traffic quality. 2, creative quality or effectiveness. 3, conversion or lander experience. Those are the 3 pieces that we break up our campaigns into in our agency to assess, and it's what I teach other people to assess when I'm showing them how to do it like we do. So we're going to deep dive on each of these. I'll go over some examples. I'm going to tell you what stats and things like that you want to look at, so you can start jumping into your own campaigns and looking at diagnosing problems or finding out why things are working on a successful campaign based on this idea. So let's start with number 1, and we're going to talk about traffic quality. Now, when we talk about traffic quality, a lot of the time what we think of is, maybe the CPM, which is really what we're paying for on all ad networks, cost per 1,000 impressions. And CPM is kind of a byproduct on who we're targeting. So if we're targeting, let's say in Google, an in-market audience for something or a custom segment of certain keywords that are searched that are high value for our industry, generally speaking, our cost per 1,000 impression goes up versus just targeting everyone broadly in all the placements and all the devices, right? Google will find the place to stick our ads in front of based on our budget, based on how much we want to spend, based on our TCPA bid, and making sure that it takes all our money. That is not in our best interest as advertisers, so we need to keep a little bit of a pulse on this. So the first thing we want to pay attention to when we're talking about traffic quality is cost per 1,000. That's CPM in your ad dashboard. You can bring that up underneath columns in Google Ads and pop that in your reports. We actually keep a base metric list, I call this. Our base metrics that we look at are going to be click-through rate, cost per click, engagement rate, view rate, average watch time per impression, which is a good one. Number of conversions, clicks, and what did I just say here? Our CPM, right? Those are the main things that we bring up when we're looking at results inside Google. So back to the point, CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions, can only really control it based on what we're targeting. Can't really reduce it in any way, shape, or form. But when we want to see if the quality of the traffic that we're getting is good, what we want to look at, in my opinion, well, really are 4 metrics, 5 metrics, but the first one is engagement rate. The engagement rate on an ad in Google means they've watched the ad for 10 seconds or they clicked on it. If it's in-stream, which is these skippable shorts or these skippable in-stream videos before we watch a video we're trying to watch, or if it's what's called in-feed, so it sort of shows up in the suggested videos or it's in that first ad placement on the Google, or pardon me, the youtube.com website. If someone mouses over that and lets it play muted for 10 seconds, or they click on the thumbnail to watch the video with audio. That's also considered an engagement, okay? So from that, you can start to see if your engagement rate is high, we've got two wins here. One, our ad is probably grabbing attention, which is good. If we can't grab attention, we can't get a click, we can't convert them, right? So that's good. Also, it's telling us that the audience that we're showing our ad to is resonating with what we've got in front of them. So we've got a double whammy here. We've got a vote for the ad creative quality, and we have a vote for our traffic, the audience quality, okay? The second thing we look at is view rate. So a view on Google is a 30-second view of the video or a full view if it's less than 30 seconds long. So you can see these are subsets of each other. Generally, your engagement rate will be higher and your view rate will be lower. So if you get a 50% engagement rate, that means half the people are watching the first 10 seconds or clicking. But a 30% view rate, that means 1/3 of people watched at 30 seconds. That makes sense. Very rarely will we keep the same engagement rate as we keep view rate. But if you see that your view rate goes from, if you get a 50% engagement rate, then your view rate drops down to like 12%, and you get a 1-minute video, there's a problem here. If you go to the creative problem or your audience isn't resonating, it's the wrong audience, okay? So those are the first sort of lead indicators we look at to see, does this audience, is this traffic matched with what we're trying to advertise? Then we start to look at our CTR, right? If we can't get good engagement and good view rate, we're not going to get a high CTR. So that's why we look at those two things first, engagement and the view rate. When we go to the CTR, the click-through rate, that's going to vary, right? It's going to vary based on the audience, it's going to vary by the offer. But if you have sort of a baseline, like let's say you know that on average, the videos that you run on Google work at about a 0.6 to 0.7% CTR, and you see this one's got a 0.3% CTR, unless it's converting like gangbusters on the lander, there's a problem. Could be an ad problem, could be a traffic problem, but you've got a problem, right? Same thing with the cost per click. Now, I talked about the cost per 1,000 impressions a second ago. The CPM, the cost per 1,000 impressions of your ad, your video on Google, can't really control it other than, who you're targeting. But if your CTR is not high enough and your CPM is high, then your clicks are going to cost too much. Now, if I'm making too many acronyms here, let me simplify this. Here's what we're looking at. From a traffic quality, and really what happens is the traffic and creative quality really go hand in hand here. If the audience you're targeting has a poor engagement rate, low view rate, low CTR, could be the audience, could be the ad, but bar none, you've got a problem that isn't to do with your lander conversion experience. So from the Conversion Triad perspective, low engagement, low view rate, low CTR, could be audience, could be ad. The only way to determine this is really one thing. If you know the ad works. So if you've run this ad to another audience and it works well, and now you're running it to another audience or another demographic segment or another device or another placement, then you can kind of start to determine which is it. Is it the audience, the traffic, or is it the ad, right? So when we're looking in accounts and we're looking at this data and we're trying to decide, does this audience work? Generally speaking, when we know our ad works, because we've tested it maybe to broad or another audience, and then we test it to this new audience that we're trying to see if it works, and we see lower engagement than we saw in our previous campaigns, lower CTR than we've seen in our previous campaigns, or the cost per 1,000 is just way too freaking high, it's an audience problem there, really, because the ad works somewhere else, but it's not working with this audience. Could you try and tailor the ad and tweak the ad to try and get it to work with that audience segment? Sure. But your time's probably much better spent testing a different audience and just leaving this one behind, okay? So that's the traffic. Now, I talked a lot about the creative quality and the ad quality already just a second ago, but I'll dig into this again. So the first segment, traffic. Second part of the conversion triad is the creative. Now, arguably, the creative makes or breaks every campaign we're running on every ad network. A crappy ad, even with all the AI machine learning targeting and stuff in the world, cannot find converters for a bad ad or a bad offer. So these metrics I just talked about, engagement rate, view rate, CTR, and one more I'm going to add in, which is average watch time per impression. All of these are your indicators for, do the people like the ad or don't they like the ad, okay? So you want to target your engagement rate. I can't tell you exactly what it should be like, but I can give you some rough numbers here. In Google, what we find with a demand gen YouTube ad, we find that on mobile and desktop, we should usually shoot for between a 45 and a 50% engagement rate overall for an ad. On tablet, it's going to be a little bit lower. If we're targeting connected TV, it should be well over 50%, generally speaking. When we dig a little bit deeper and we look at the different placements that we can run ads for on demand gen, we've got shorts, we've got in-stream, which is the skippable ads. We've got in-feed, which are like the display-based ads that you see around the YouTube website. We've got Gmail. We got the Discover app on Android devices. Your engagement is going to be highest on the in-stream placement. It's going to be then probably next highest on shorts, but it's going to drop from like 40 or 50% in-stream down to as low as 12 to 15% in shorts, which makes sense. People are like just swiping away. It's like a TikTok style experience, right? And then really engagement in-stream or in-feed and Gmail and stuff, it's almost impossible. You know, it really comes down to your thumbnail there. So we really focus on the engagement in the shorts and the in-stream segment. Same with the view rate. Your view rate, we like to keep up in the 25 to 30% on in-stream. It's going to dip down aggressively, probably down to single digits in shorts. And then the view rate once in feed, again, is totally going to depend on what you can get a click for or if you can get engagement on the ad. So we're really more focused on the in-stream and short segment there. Now, what you want to look for are do these ads get low engagement? If they're getting low engagement, are they getting it on a specific device or with the specific demographic segments such as ages or genders? Are they getting it with specific audiences you're testing? Where is it happening? You're trying to find a place where if it's happening everywhere, okay, then you're first, generally speaking, go back to the drawing board. You need a new 5 to 10-second intro for that ad. Could be what you're saying or could be what's on screen, but you need to try and change both of them, bar none. There's nothing you can do there. You need to get that engagement rate up. If your engagement isn't high, then your view rate's not going to get high because like I mentioned earlier, view engagement is a 10-second view or a click and view rate is a 30-second view. So if you can't get a 10-second view, you can't get a 30-second view. Does that make sense? So focus on that first 10 seconds first. So we can't put the cart before the horse. We can't get high engagement. We can't get high view rate. Don't even worry about getting the CTR or anything like that. So engagement rate, view rate. Then we are going to look, like I mentioned, at the click-through rate. So let's say we've got a really high engagement rate, 50% engagement rate, 30% view rate, 0.2% CTR. Crappy, right? What do we do now? Well, first thing I do if I see this in a coaching client or a consulting client's account, I say, let me see your ad. So I open it up, I look at it. Let's say the ad's a minute and 13 seconds long, right? They got a 50% engagement rate. They got a real great, shocking, compelling intro, which makes me want to watch. And the first 30 seconds are stacked with benefits and maybe some stuff that's like really connecting with me emotionally to make me want to watch. And I keep watching and I'm at like, let's say 49 seconds into this minute 13 ad. And I haven't had a call to action yet. They haven't told me what I'm doing, why I'm there, what I do to take action. If yes, I'm nodding and I want to do something. And then the first call to action is literally at 1 minute. So what does that mean? That means that you got half the people watching the first 10 seconds. You got 30% of the people watching the first 30 seconds. But then it drags on and people are like, yeah, I'm interested, right? But you're not telling them what to do. You got to move that CTA up as often as possible within that first, ideally 30 seconds. But here's the secret metric that we like to look at. If you look at the average view time per impression. So what does this mean? I'm using so many acronyms in this video, I apologize. You can get a piece of data out of just about every ad network, right? In Meta, you can look at like view through rate, or you can look at like different percentage plays, right? All of this stuff in Meta, generally what I look at is look at 3-second views and I look at through play rate. Those are the two things I tend to focus on. And then the average duration watched. In TikTok, it's like 7-second focus views, I believe, and then through play rate as well, and average time watched. This average time watched is a golden metric that I don't hear anyone talking about, but it gives me the data I need to know with what part of my ad I need to replace. So let's say the average amount of time watched in my ad is 23 seconds, and it's a minute and 29 seconds long. I'm going to really focus in on that first 23 to 30 seconds and optimize the crap out of that to get high engagement, good view rate of that first 30 seconds, and get a call to action in there, because that's my golden spot. If I want that ad to perform as good as possible, not just on Google, on any placement, I want to hammer it all into that average view time, average time per impression, right? Most people are not talking. Actually, no one I consult with in my circles is talking about this. And this This takes all the guesswork out of your ads. You start, okay, yes, you got to throw a bunch of crap against the wall to figure out what's going to work. But once you throw all that crap against the wall and you start gathering this data, now you start letting the stats guide you. You start saying, okay, well, I've got a half decent engagement, so my intro is good, but my view rate drops off and I got piss poor CTR. Well, then go to work on that, right? Get your view rate up and get a CTA up in that and see if you can get that view rate up and get your CTR up, right? Because this is the game, right? If you could have the best freaking lander in the world, which we're going to get to here in a second, but if no one clicks to it because your ad's not doing its job, who gives a shit, right? Because no one's ever going to see it. All right. So that is the creative section of the conversion triad, right? Now, as an aside here, all this stuff might seem super confusing. If it is, I've got you covered because here's what we've got. There's a link below where you can get my free demand gen primer course. That does not cover all of this conversion triad stuff, but it's sort of the gateway into all the crazy metrics and things that we look at in our agency to figure out. You can get that. You can get a top level view of how we're looking at demand gen campaigns, how we're setting up, how we're running them. If you're interested in learning more, we have our demand gen switch course coming. It may be out now when you're watching this, which is going to cover all of this stuff. It's going to cover the conversion triad. It's going to cover how we set up different videos for different placements, how we tweak our campaigns, how we run experiments to determine what ads are winning, what audiences to test, what placements to test, all that crazy stuff. And it seems super complicated, but once you figure this out, it's like being able to see through the matrix because it solves so many problems for us. We're no longer just guessing at what ads work. We've got data to support our hypothesis of, yeah, this ad should work based on what the account feeds us back, okay? Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. All right, let's jump to the third part of the conversion triad, which is landing page conversion. Now, this one is literally the most simplest in my opinion because the lander works or it doesn't. But there is something we like to try and set up on all of our landing pages if possible. We want to have some form of engagement metric on our landing page so we can tell what the heck is happening. What does that mean? Well, generally speaking, on all our personal landers that we own, they're usually some sort of assessment type quiz funnel, which means we can measure if people start engaging with the quiz. All other things equal, when someone clicks from one of our ads, lands on our landing page, starts engaging with the quiz, they're a better person to potentially go through the whole quiz than someone who did nothing. Does that make sense? They can't complete the quiz and become a lead if they don't answer the first question. So someone who clicks our ad, lands on the lander, and doesn't touch the quiz, that's not as good of quality person as someone who does, okay? Bar none, that's it. So we start to gauge the quality of a click from an ad based on do they engage with the quiz? And then a subset of people who engage with the quiz will convert on the quiz, if that makes sense, okay? Now, let's say you don't have a quiz funnel, you can't do this. Well, what other elements on your page can you time? Can you look at time on site? Can you look at scroll depth? How far do they scroll? Can you look at starting to engage with a form? Can you look at pressing play on a video or time on site? I think I said that. Most of these things can all be set up within GTM and Google Analytics to fire back events into different places so you can start to gauge how well your lander is converting. Lots of people use Visual Website Optimizer or whatever, and they start running experiments. They start split testing landers, trying to figure out what works better, what doesn't work better. When in reality, before you even start split testing, you need to know what the problem is. If people are getting to your lander and completely leaving, then it's likely crap. It could be your ad. Your ad's totally promising something different, but generally speaking, your lander's probably crap. So you want to start super basic. I wouldn't even split test the lander. I would just start trying new landers because obviously if this one doesn't work, right? But that is the key. So those three pieces coming together, the traffic quality, which overlaps very closely, as you can see, with creative quality, but looking at your cost per 1,000 impressions and looking at how that performs across devices, across demographic data and different audience segments, finding the happy medium there where your CPM matches up with all the other stats to make sure that your CPAs, your sales, your lead cost, whatever, is acceptable. And then looking at the creative deeper, and then looking at the engagement rate, the view rate, the click-through, the cost per click, and then also the average watch time per impression. All those things together give us a really good picture of how that video ad is performing for that audience, for that campaign. And then we can, based on like what I described, the time it watched, the time it didn't watch, the click-through rate or the lack of helps us determine what we can do to that video to make it perform better, or if we've tried everything, we just scrap it and it doesn't work. And then the landing page, like I just discussed, is we need two metrics. We need our actual conversion. We need okay, did it work or didn't it work? And then ideally, because sometimes we can be a while getting enough conversions to see if it's statistically relevant or not, we want to bring in another element, some form of engagement. Could be time on site, could be engagement with a quiz, could be clicking play on a video, could be time on site, could be scrolling on the site, could be engaging with reviews or whatever it is that your site does, right? So that's a ton of information in this video, I know, and you'll probably want to watch it a couple times and maybe take some notes, but I would encourage you to grab my free Demand Gen Primer course. You can do that by clicking the link underneath this video in the description, and that's a free video that'll get sent out to you. You can watch it at your own leisure, right? But if you enjoyed the value I gave in this, I would encourage you to like and subscribe, because I'm about to go on a content marathon here of providing a crap ton of information like this to help guide you, my fellow media buyers, business owners, and agency owners in how to manage these platforms, because we still have more control than we think. But even though the buttons are getting taken away from us for what we can change and what we can't tweak and what we can't target and things like this. So again, thanks for watching this. I'll see you in the next one. Try implementing the Conversion Triad in your campaigns and in your analysis, and I think you will feel more in control than you ever have, rather than just thinking that you have to keep writing new ads because you have no idea what's working or what isn't working. All right. So thanks so much. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.